I'll talk about running a Raptoreum Smartnode, and I've only been doing this for about a week, but it requires that you procure 1.8 million Raptoreum, which right now it's really cheap, and I don't recommend you do it because you're essentially holding a depreciating asset, which is something that decreases in value, which you wouldn't even call it an asset at that point. It's really a liability. But it used to be 2 US pennies, and now it's less than 2. It's probably 1/5 of a penny, less than 1/5 of a penny at this point. But it requires that you run this Smartnode 100% of the time, and I've been watching videos of people saying, oh, they can run it for really cheap, but if you look at the recommended requirements, which is 4 gigabytes of RAM, 2 single-threaded CPU cores, and about 25 gigabytes of hard drive space, I don't know how they can run it for that cheap, but for me, if you find a VPS that allows you to run a Smartnode and you pay up front for, let's say, 3 years worth of time, it probably equates to about 35 cents a day running it. And at the recording of this video, which is the middle of January 2023, it generates 1,000 Raptoreum a day, which at its current price point is about $1.50 US. But over time, it should decrease in value, and you're asking yourself, well, what do you do with this extra Raptoreum? And I send it over to a shared hosting provider where it just compounds over time. I used to have it on one of these shared hosting providers, and I just requested a withdrawal, which they fulfilled. And the nice thing about running this is you don't have to upfront a significant life-changing amount of money to do it. You can just find a friend or a buddy and go halfway into it and run it on yourself, so you can kind of sniff what it is. And this console window right here is just the debug log from it. So you have to rotate the debug log, which you can do with log rotate D. It's a daemon that you can configure. And I actually had to reference the dash documentation on how to do, because Raptoreum is a fork of dash. But it generates about 1,000 Raptoreum a day, which is about $1.50. And there's only about 700 to 800 they call them smart nodes, but if you look at the source code, they're changing Dash's master nodes to a smart node. But if I were to actually try this with Dash coin, you would need 1,000 Dash, and unfortunately a Dash is about $44 a coin, and so that would require, if I were to go 50% into it, it would require about $22,000 with a Dash, which is outside of my price range. But at least with Raptoreum, it's more feasible. But one thing I noticed is that in the logs, they'll show you smart nodes getting penalized or banned, and I think that's what happens when you go in too cheap into a smart node, because if you don't meet either the minimum or the recommended specs, or someone's running it from home, and if it goes offline, you start getting penalized, and then eventually you get banned, but you can resubmit a request to get added back in, but it costs a little bit of Raptoreum to do it. It's like pennies to do, but the whole idea is to keep this running 24/7 and set it up so you pay a little bit more than the cheaper ones, but it should last for a couple of years, assuming that the project is still going by then. But again, in terms of like, is this a good investment? My answer is absolutely not, but it's kind of fun to do with, like, because I'm not really into the whole mining thing. I don't mind the proof of stake stuff because I don't need an extra computer, or I don't have to run this thing 24/7. I just have it run up in a data center, And fortunately, I don't have to keep the wallet with all the Raptoreum on the server. It just has like this control wallet on the server with some voting keys on it. But the actual wallet with the goods is located somewhere else, not on the server, which I definitely like that setup about it. So, yeah, I mean, it takes a couple hours to get set up, and then you have to allow a certain port through, and then you're good to go. Another thing I noticed that when I started running it, you have to do this process where you bootstrap it. You take the blockchain, put it on the computer, and it takes about 30 minutes for it to get up to speed. But once you do that, it's good and you're up and running. And hopefully I don't have to stop or reboot it in a year or two. But I have a little script running in the background. Of course, I have to reference the dash documentation for it to have it check every minute and make sure it's running. And if it's not running, start it up again. But yeah, that's it for this video. And of course, thanks for watching.